is the cost of lies? Is that if we hear enough lies, then we no longer recognize the truth at all.
Chernobyl is a mini series that has been out a little bit. If you haven't seen it yet, understand that it is definitely not for kids, and it is very serious topics, and it is as non fictional as it possibly can be, while being a production that was made in not exactly Pripyat, which is the city near Chernobyl, or Chernobyl itself. However, due to the fact that there was these planned model cities that look exactly like each other, almost down to literally the rec center signage, uh, it is extremely close in scale, size, operation, and the world feels lived in. It's not just because of the sets, it's also because the crew genuinely cared. They went to Chernobyl, they went to Pripyat, they took extensive pictures. They even shot some of the scenes in those locations, especially at the end. By the way, there will be spoilers in this. There's no way for me to discuss this older show, this slash miniseries, without really going into spoilers. So at the end with the show trial, that was actually filmed within the exclusion zone. And there is a wonderful podcast series before I go any further. So if you are a seasoned Chernobyl fan and you're listening to this just out of curiosity and interest to see what I feel about it, I'll continue. But just know if you haven't already seen it or heard it, the Chernobyl podcast series is wonderful. It has the showrunners, has great interviews, and it is hours of great content on YouTube. And they discuss the challenges of creating such an amazing event, the need to respect the firsthand accounts and the untold stories, the untold heroes of that time period that fought alongside each other to make this less painful. It's always a thing with a disaster is to stop the hurt. And I've always felt that disaster movies and shows lack that soul. They lack that caring. It's always about me, me, me. It's always about the main character, and if you're lucky, they have a family they have to save, whether it's theirs or I'll call it the adopted family incident, where there's a carload of innocent people and we got to save them now, or it's a little girl like in The Last of Us, that may save the day, and then slowly but surely you find out a secret, and oh well, that person's going to save everything with their blood vaccine or whatever it is. Um, but in real life, that is often not the case. People that genuinely want to stop the hurt, they want to make it better, come from all walks of life. And if enough people do good, then things get better. I'm keeping this as simplistic as possible. It's from the heart, and I feel like this show has a lot of heart. I feel like the developers slash showrunners, whatever you like to call them, they really thought it through, like what people honestly felt like on that night and into the days after. The people that actually even understood the threat. The fascinating topics that are covered in the show was the USSR, a non-existent political entity anymore that administered the entirety of the Soviet Union and their Politburo and all of the levels of government under it. I'm not going to go into all that history lesson, but just understand that whatever they said went, and they didn't tell people the dangers of this unshielded nuclear power, well, lightly shielded nuclear power plant that had very minimal safety protections, and the testing was done by the overnight crew that was not ready to do it. Most of them weren't even the technicians that had enough skill and training and years of expertise and subject matter to know the dangers that they were creating in a test that was never done before. But this miniseries hits the play button right after that boom, basically. You only see a very small portion of the place functioning, and I'm okay with that. There's already enough meat on the bone to really dive into the aftermath of the disaster, especially from the fireman's perspective, from the scientist's perspective. And while there's only a couple that you actually see, like Legazo and Shermine, there's only a couple that are actually in the story. You just have to keep in the back of your mind that those people that you see in the show actually represent groups of scientists. there was entire team under Lagasso, and there was entire teams that came from the different science parts of the country, the men and women that made up their sciences in the nuclear physics, and they were pretty advanced for their time. The actual theoretical physics and some of the stuff they built that went bang were actually pretty advanced. It was more on the reactors administration side and the reactor teams that were a little maybe wet behind the ears and not quite up to par, in my opinion. And the show shows that very well. A lot of the firsthand accounts that are covered show that there was a lot of honest people. And I'm going to keep my opinions of Dyatlov out of this. But other than a couple key people, above Dyatlov and Dyatlov himself, they were all amazing folks. And many of them suffered due to the actions of this bad decision to create this disaster. And Chernobyl has been something we've never quite seen at this scale before or after, thank goodness. And one of the things the show does that it never doesn't pull punches about is it shows the use of what's called the nickname the biorobots. People had to operate hermetically sealed dozers and clear the ground because the ground had radiation in large portions of where the winds blew. People had to clear those rooftops because even the robots were getting their circuitry fried. And in the show, there's amazing scenes where you have like the pipe being banged, and they only have like 60 seconds to run out there, knock like 3 things off the side, and it's incredibly dangerous. If they get stuck out there, they're basically halving their lives essentially. The action's done, and the fear you feel, the desire to help, the desire to serve, is prominent in these people's lives, and it ekes through a little bit throughout every single scene. I think of the second episode, where you have the end of the episode is just so rough, where they have the 3 men who volunteered to risk their lives to go underneath to turn the valves to free up the water that shouldn't be there, that was filled up from the firework, and their lights going out. The radiation is so high, it's literally knocking the connections between their batteries and their lights inside of them. And they don't show that they have the backup batteries. They go right to credits, and you just hear the Geiger counters just chirping away. And speaking of that, the show has a few scientific flaws and things that are stylistic choices, I would argue, more than anything. Particularly in the use of their masks that they use. So the masks were chosen not to be worn all the time because the actors wanted to be able to show their emotions. In real life, they wore the mask quite often, especially when there's cameras around, at least based on the accounts we've seen and the literal photographs we have, especially when they were near the site. I think also out of self-preservation, and to show a good sign to the rest of the troops, to see the team seeing the leadership wearing the mask was a good move. The other mention is the show is in English. So if you're still kind of on the fence here and you're going, is it worth my time, etc., it's in perfect English, and it's English for most of them. Some of the characters kind of have an Eastern European accent, and they kind of try to color it a little bit that way, but just understand what you're getting into. It's not going to be some perfect Russian delivery. This isn't like the Napoleon movie they made or something like that, in the old Russian world. This is this is perfect English spoken, and I'm okay with that. I can suspend my disbelief about that so I can understand what's happening. Now, speaking of disaster movies that are foreign languages, The Wave comes to mind, which was a wonderful Norwegian flick that covers a really, I should make a video about that, really interesting topic, a threat that is persistent throughout their lifetimes of these large pieces of rock that could fall off at any moment into their fjords and cause massive, like, tsunami like waves inside of their lock. I guess you call it their lock system. I apologize if that's not the correct term to our friends from that part of the world. But I had no idea this was a thing, and I was fascinated by this niche world, and then this disaster movie made around this fictional incident that was created, and it actually really feels lived in. And when you really are invested, at least in my opinion, I'm okay with it being in a foreign language. I watched the heck out of that. I've watched that, I think, recently, just a couple months ago. I rewatched it again because it's it's a wonderful movie, and it has the roller coaster effect. A lot of good disaster movies, they have that lull in the events. You know something's about to happen. The characters don't, and you start seeing the reaction to it, and that slow burn. It feels really good. A lot like the movie Sicario, which has nothing to do with a different kind of man-made disaster, but fictional movie. But slow burn that Villeneuve can deliver on a much larger budget, and but it has the same roller coaster effect where you have these lulls in the action, and then that instant rise and jump and then fall, just the bottom falls out of the characters' worlds, and you're already invested because you've gotten to know these characters and you really want to see them succeed, or maybe not so succeed if they're the villains. So yeah, it's an interesting world that they've created, and Chernobyl has a little bit of that. I've noticed in the miniseries that each one of the episodes tends to have I'll call it a pocketed storyline, where they try to develop an entire storyline that is finessed, that is something that is desirable, tangible, and deliverable by the end of the episode. And there's only that one cliffhanger that really like leaves you hanging, where each episode tends to introduce a new threat, a new issue, a new problem, and then the characters have to advance through it. So if this type of show interests you, it's on Max, which used to be HBO, and that's a whole topic for another day about how that ended up. But it's also available on Blu-ray. I have a 4K Blu-ray of it, and I'll also throw in a small comment on that as well. It is one of the best 4K Blu-rays I've seen in a while. The sound design is excellent. The compression is not there, obviously. It's one of the few benefits of the 4K Blu-ray technology, and the audio is great. I don't have an amazing sound system. I literally have a very basic sound bar configuration on a decent TV and my 4K Blu-ray player. And I really enjoy it, and it really fills the room. And you feel like you're really part of the action, which is very uncommon nowadays on TV shows of this scale. It's a shame that this was a mini series. I understand it was just exploring one topic, but somehow I wish this mini series went on. I have a little bit of that lingering feeling. I mentioned this in my Silo review I just did, where when you watch a show that's really good and really catches you, and you really get to know the characters, and you really fall in love with everything, even though some of the characters, of course, do die at the end of Chernobyl in many different ways, tragically. It's a shame because you get to know their world and you'd like to see more, maybe even previous stuff, like how they got to where they were, or how these things were developed, etc., etc. And when you have a 4K Blu-ray sitting on the shelf of a single, what's called season, in this case the miniseries, it kind of has pangs of like what could have been. And yes, it's a self-contained storyline. They did a fantastic job with the show. Very, very small comment I want to bookend this with is that I have a lot of respect for the men and women who risked their lives and in some case gave their all to make this less bad back then. This is not current events. I'm not commenting on current events. I am just stating that I have an immense amount of respect for everyone who was involved with the cleanup and recovery of this major event in human history. And for better or worse, it happened, and they tried to make it better. So a lot of respect to anyone who did positively react and step up. there is so many times in human history where if people do more good, it's less bad. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to keep it very basic like that. And I'm going to wrap it up here. If you think this is interested you at all, give it a shot. Recommend have a comedy movie or something else on speed dial, maybe after an episode or two to see if it's for you. And then that's a nice, good little recovery arc for you, especially because this is a very heavy topic, especially if you're watching it as a couple or something like that. All right. That's all I got for now. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this type of stuff. Like and comment. Like I said, just respectful of the characters. We can make fun of their actions or comment on their actions. Just be respectful of the characters. A lot of them are based on real people. On this one, take care. Just wanted to add to this that if there's enough interest, I can make a follow-up video to this content, specifically about the Chernobyl miniseries, just about the miniseries, and discuss some of the things that they really did not go through too well. I listen to all my own content before it goes out the door just to be sure there isn't some screeching noises or things that need to be de-essed or something like that. So a little finessing with the audio and everything. So it may sound natural, but there's a lot of work that goes into it to make it a little more usable and listenable for phones, on your headphones, earbuds, on the computer, whatever you're using. And one of the things that I come to mind is I'm shocked I forgot to talk about that there was operational other reactors, and the miniseries covers that. The three divers I talked about, I kind of geeked out about the lighting and the way the show handled the cliffhanger. I forgot to mention some of those men that were sitting in that room. They worked in the other reactors. There was people working inside the reactors while this incident was happening and afterwards, because the city of Kiev would have frozen if it wasn't for those other reactors staying running. And as it was, they were already maxed out because, well, I'm going to use air quotes here. I'm not saying they were maxed out on the production. I'm saying they had to, they could not shut down. They could not shut down because of the needs of this massive city. You have to remember the RBMK reactors were totally safe in the mindset of the Russian Empire, whatever you want to call it. And the critical thing here was that the cheap control rods they used that were cheaper to use had this major fault. The show makes a point of Legasso is kind of like sacrificing his career to get word out about it, but things were already quietly getting out the door about these issues on the back end, apparently. And if you want to kind of go into the actual sciences of Chernobyl, the mini series and the how it kind of handled the sciences, I think that would be a fun deep dive episode we can make and create discussions about, but only if people really want that. So just figured I'd throw that out there and kind of add a little bit more taste of just how extreme the situation was and how like life had to keep going on. You know, the city itself kept functioning for hour after hour, day after day, until all of a sudden it didn't. And one of the largest mass evacuations in human history, the most orderly ones anyway, had to happen. And those reactors kept running for ages after the incident happened. So there's a lot of fun stuff there. I could prepare some, what the miniseries got right and wrong if you want. I'm not saying like a Cinema Sins or something that deep in the weeds, but we could actually do that if people would like that. So just a thought in the back of my mind. And once again, do not forget about the mini-series, the behind the scenes of the Chernobyl incident with the showrunners is absolutely full of wonderful things. I'm going to have a link to that in the comments. The description. All right, for real this time. Have a great night.